This is how you turn your mic. there's a, to the upper right, there's a. Okay, there we go. Yep. Okay, the meeting of the Rent Control Board for February 14th is hereby called back to order after its closed session. Please join me in a salute to our flag. Okay, just a quick note before we get started. If anyone wishes to address the board on a specific item on tonight's agenda or at public comment, please see our secretary to fill in a speaker slip. Now, would the general counsel please give us a report of closed session?
Yes, the board convened into closed session at 6:11 and concluded closed session at 6:55 and considered 2 items of prospective litigation. The board concluded its closed session with no reportable action taken. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, take a moment to review the minutes from January 10th if you have not already, and after that, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting.
I reviewed them and so moved that we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, great. This is a voice vote, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Are you an aye? Aye. Okay, great. The minutes are approved. Now we'll move on to special agenda items, brief announcements, commendations, awards, introductions. I'll go ahead to our executive director, Condon here. Do you have any special agenda items?
I have a couple of things. Thank you. So good evening, board members and members of the public. A couple of items. First, I want to welcome Lynn Nalaboff. She's our new hearings department manager after
Welcome.
Amy Regalado retired. So welcome to Lynn. The next seminar that the board will be offering is the Owning Rental Property in Santa Monica seminar. That will be on March 6th, Wednesday, March 6th, in the morning from 9:30 to noon at the main library. It's a very good opportunity for property owners, managers, anybody who's interested to learn more about the basics of the rent control law, including topics rents, amenities, maintenance, eviction limitations, restrictions on change of use, and services available through the Rent Control Board. So anybody who's interested should contact our office or email the Rent Control office to sign up for Wednesday, March 6th. And then the other announcement is just to hold the date. Every year in April, the City Attorney's Office hosts a fair housing workshop. This year, like last year, we're doing this in collaboration with the City Attorney's Office, the Rent Control Board, Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights, AGLA, and Action, the local landlord group. So that date will be Tuesday, April 23rd from 9 to noon, again at the main library. And we'll have information about how to sign up for that on our website by the end of this month. That's it.
Question, are we going to record these seminars so that people can watch them later on our website?
We have done that. Mr. Costello can remind me whether we have the owning rental property on our website at this time. Not yet. So we can look into whether we can set up recording that.
I would love that if we could make that available.
I think we have somebody narrated the former one, but it would be different to tape it with the people presenting it. So
Great.
Mr. Costello can look into that. And we did that, we taped the landlord-tenant forum that we did last December with the City Attorney's Office. I'll raise this issue with the committee.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other announcements? No? Okay. Moving on to item 7, public comment. This is the time set aside for members of the public to address the board on matters that are not included on the agenda, but are within the board's subject matter jurisdiction. Please note that the board cannot take official action at tonight's meeting on any matter not included on the agenda, but we're certainly happy to take your comments. I'll call up Jay Johnson.
Myself. Good evening, commissioners. Good news on the retrofit story. I want to update everyone because I think we have a lot to be proud of ourselves collectively. The retrofit program, as you know, is a looming problem in our city with 2,000 buildings that need to be retrofitted that are on the list. Now, FEMA has given grants, in particular to the city of Berkeley, and we are in the process, we, the city of Santa Monica, are in the process of filing an application, this being the Building and Safety Department through the Planning Department, for $4 million. Due March 15th is the deadline to submit the application. The application and the way it's worked out with the city of Berkeley is landlords, property owners get grants, not loans, grants of $25,000 each for each particular project. The deadline, as I mentioned, is March 15th to get the application in, and it's in its final stages of final drafting. I believe it's virtually completed. Now, this $4 million, or whatever money we are able to get from them, is administered by the OES in Sacramento, which is the Office of Emergency Services. So it's really administered by the state of California, even though the money comes from FEMA, which is national. I want to particularly thank Ariella of Ted Lieu's office for her support, and Ted Lieu's support for that matter, Colby at Ben Allen's office, the people at Assembly Member Bloom's office, the Government Affairs Committee of the Chamber of Commerce, his support, and in particular Ariel Sukaras with Building and Safety, who really has been the lead person on putting all this together. I've been involved and have been doing an effort of doing outreach and alerting all the different entities for this involvement based on Matt Millen coming forward and other progressive landlords to explain what happened in Berkeley. They are the ones who discovered it. Also, in particular, to Commissioner Phillips here on the Rent Control Board for her letter last October to City Council to raise the issue with City Council. And I believe Council Member McCune also has said some important things on that. We need your help now. We collectively as a city need the support and the help of the Rent Control Board in a letter to join with the application explaining why it is so important from the Rent Control Board perspective that we get this money. That it's to preserve, of course, existing units, and I'm sure you know all the arguments. This is such a win-win situation, as we've talked before. I wanted to reiterate it. Anytime you reduce costs to landlords, it's the same thing as getting a rent increase. That if we work together, it's going to be excellent. Tenants, it's just getting the safety out of it, in particular, as well as the property owners. The money is coming from the taxpayers. This is FEMA money. It's just not magic money from out of the air. It's taxpayer money paid by both residents, tenants of this city, as well as the landlords. So in effect, tenants are paying a part of the retrofit that we've all been talking about for the last year. Who pays? If I could have another minute.
Yeah, you can finish your comment.
On the same concept, regarding crime in the city, in the issue, another project would be to expand Neighborhood Watch. Ben Allen's office in Sacramento is supporting that extra funding for outreach and development of Neighborhood Watch. Again, good for landlords, good for tenants, no cost for either, basically. I can explain the program if you would like in a little bit detail, but I'll just let it go at that, except to say there's a lot of rumors floating around and misinformation, which I'll be happy to get into details of some people who are, say, scared of how much money, et cetera. But I would like to, if there's a question, to explain just a little bit.
Thank you. I believe we have a couple of commissioners who do want to ask you questions. Commissioner Foster?
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Johnston, are you formally requesting a letter of support? Is that what you mentioned?
I would recommend
signing on to your application
that the Rent
somehow?
Board prepare a letter, a document to go with the application that Ariel and Building Safety is preparing as the application to FEMA for the $4 million.
Okay, can I ask a question of staff? If staff were to evaluate that it is relevant and that we have standing to do so, would we have time at a March 14th meeting to bring this as a discussion item and do some sort of a letter of support, or is that something you could do administratively?
Well, the board has already discussed this issue twice and twice communicated with the council that they would hope they could find some funding. So I think you've already expressed your support for this, and we can draft a letter and talk with Mr. Ariel to make sure that the board's support is there. Do you agree?
Well, then that's what we'll do.
Thank you very much. I like
Was
that
there anything
solution.
else from?
I think Commissioner Phyllis had a question.
So my first question was just logistically how we get that letter done, because I want to make sure that we do. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer to try to help folks get this funding. Mr. Johnson, do you have anything else to add or finish your thought?
It's a concern, and it's a concern of perception. The rumor, and I underline the word rumor, is that there were 10 applications for permits in the city for earthquake retrofitting and 2,000 buildings on the list. We do not have the matrix, the data, to know how many applications have been filed. When I say we, I mean collectively in the news gathering area. We don't know how many permits have been pulled for retrofitting, nor how many applications are pending and have been in the cycle, nor how long they've been in the system. I applied in July, and today is February. Back and forth, questions, answers. Everyone has a 2-week period to respond, and look how the time is drawn. It's been, 7 or 8 months just to get the answer back on one project. I've got 4 or 5 to do, and the deadline is what, the end of next year? It's no way is it going to happen. There's 200 structural engineers in Southern California Association and something like 8,000 or 10,000 buildings at least in the city. There are problems here, and everything we can do to help it. In particular, I would mention the condo associations, particularly the TORCA condo associations. There was just something I saw the other day that one of the members who owns one of the units sent a letter to everybody else, get $11,000 ready by March 1st, when in fact these things are years away. So everything that can be done to calm the waters. Look, there's plenty of time here. People are working. There's going to be money theoretically at the end of the line. Relax. I think those kinds of statements would be helpful here to stop any panic feelings,
Thanks,
anxiety
Commissioner
feelings.
Phillips.
So would you recommend, some outreach to, the jurisdiction of the board is really to rent-controlled units, but I understand we couldn't make recommendations to the city with regard
To answer your point, the publication that the Rent Control Board sends out in a few months, have articles and updates information. Perhaps there could be a couple of paragraphs in there of a calming nature that know that there's support and there's phone numbers and access and money, etc., to make tenants in particular feel not threatened by this entire process. And of course, there's particularly the small landlords who are as well, for that matter. They get the newsletter as well. So that would help. And anything that could be done as a press release between now and then to the local press would be helpful. Gets in the local newspapers, as well as anything you want to post on the website that the rent board maintains would be helpful. Any kind of outreach like that on retrofit just helps build a team spirit of everyone involved on this thing to relax. Let's get it done. But these are big jobs.
Okay. Thank
you
you
very
for your
much.
comments. We appreciate you coming here today. As you know, this issue is of personal importance to me and us, I believe. I am in strong support of a support letter for the FEMA application. I think we've been asking for additional financing mechanisms for quite some time. I'm glad that City Council finally came around and decided to get on the ball here. Additionally, I think you're absolutely right. We need to calm the waters. I just want to clarify for everyone that our jurisdiction is limited to the rent-controlled units. So with respect to education and outreach on earthquake retrofitting responsibilities, that's not actually within our jurisdiction. However, I think to the extent that this affects rent-controlled landlords and tenants, we need to make sure that we are communicating rights and responsibilities out. So maybe, Mr. Costello, we could talk about some sort of outreach options as well as inclusion in the newsletter. And finally, I think that we have a significant issue with respect to the fact that not enough of these have been completed, if this is in fact the case. So staff, I'm asking that we invite building and safety. I know what you're going to say, but I'm asking that we invite them to update us as to what the numbers really are here, what the process looks like, and how we're going to get to goal so that everyone is in compliance by the date that they need to be in compliance. I'd like an update.
I'll ask for that and ask them. But so everybody knows, notices were sent to owners last year, giving them 2 years to get a structural engineer's report. Then after that, they'll have 4 years to complete the retrofitting. So as Mr. Johnson said, they don't all have to be done this year. There's a 6-year timeline here. So I will ask the Building and Safety Department for that information and provide that to you in a written communication. And we can include something in our newsletter about the fact that this program is underway. But with consideration to what our jurisdiction is and what the city's jurisdiction is.
Yeah, I was
Noted.
just gonna comment that exactly that I had actually spoken with staff earlier this month about questions I had that were similar about timing and how many are proceeding, and Tracy, reminded me that there's 6 years to start. And also, I'm very much hopeful that the building list, even though it's very long, many of those people complied the first time they were asked to do these repairs by the city in the 90s. So many of those buildings just happen to be soft story buildings. Doesn't mean that they all need to be retrofitted. I know there are concerns about price gouging and availability. I think other cities, we are not first in line doing this. We are almost last in line behind other cities like Berkeley and haven't San Francisco and Berkeley already been?
Berkeley's the only one I know.
Well, I mean, we're behind LA.
Yeah, they're all underway. So, I think we're all hopeful that it's going to get done in a timely fashion, and owners are obviously aware. So if you think we need to speak to renters, then we can do that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Phillips?
I'll just keep it brief. I just want to thank you, Mr. Johnson, for the time that you've put into this issue and your leadership. I think you've really been kind of a prophetic voice in the community and a leader, not just on this particular issue, but on improving relations between the property owner community and the board. And I think that, it's worthwhile when you see these types of things come together, like the possibility of getting grants to our property owners. So I just want to thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate it. Seeing no further public comment, we will move on to jurisdictional items. This is the time in the agenda where we hear exemptions, appeals, et cetera. We're going to start with an exemption. Anyone who testifies, I'm asking, be sworn in by our board secretary, Lonnie, if that's okay. We will limit the time of each speaker to 5 minutes for the appellants and applicants, and 3 minutes for others, if that's okay. We are first proceeding with 10A1, and I'm going to recuse myself from this item as I have been represented by the applicant and her partner in real estate transactions, and I'd prefer to recuse myself.
So I think first up, we'll start with the staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is owner occupancy exemption application 1785 for 2718 Broadway. The applicant is Ms. Eliza Sedaratfer. Ms. Sedaratfer bought this 3-unit property at 2718 Broadway with her sister and her husband back in December of 2017. And she claims she moved onto the property in June of 2018 as her principal place of residence. Therefore, she's applied for its exemption as an owner-occupied property of 3 or fewer units. To prevail, she bears the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that she has lived on the property as her principal residence since at least July 11th, 2018. Because the tenants on the property disputed Ms. Sedaratfer's claim, the matter was referred to an evidentiary hearing. The hearing officer found that Ms. Sedaratfer failed to meet her evidentiary burden and recommended that the board deny the application. Excuse me. Ms. Sedaratfer did provide some evidence that she resides on the property. A change of address form filed with the DMV lists the property at issue as her address, as do bills and statements from Spectrum, Chase Credit Card, U.S. Bank, and a purchase confirmation from West Elm. Some evidence supports her claimed residence, but only several months after the critical date of July 2018. She submitted Uber Eats receipts. The staff report mistakenly stated that they show delivery to her sister's address in Santa Monica only. In fact, there are 3 receipts that show delivery to her home, but these receipts are all on or after October 22nd, 2018. Ring security system data shows Ms. Sedaratfer on the property 40 times in a 60-day period, but this period starts in October 2018. Other evidence directly contradicts her claim. Gas bills for the period in question only show 6 to 9 therms used each billing period for a unit that has a gas heater, a gas stove, and a gas-operated hot water heater that also provides hot water for the laundry room. Ms. Sedal-Afar states in her written response that there's still more than that this is still more than the 2 therms the meter showed as being used before her claimed move-in date, but the usage is still in single digits, and that's with the inclusion of the gas for the hot water in the laundry room. The board's longtime hearing investigator, Pete Savino, visited the property, and based on his experience and observation, he stated that it was sparsely furnished. Kitchen cabinets and the refrigerator were lightly supplied with food, dishes, and supplies. The windows had no treatment, and there were only a limited number of personal items. The tenants on the property, Rachel Jauregui, Peter Magadini, and Ashley Fox, all said that they rarely see Ms. Sedal-Afar on the property, in contrast with the previous tenant in the unit. Ms. Jauregui said the unit's usually dark. Mr. Magadini said that he used to hear people in the unit all the time with a prior occupant, but he does not hear anyone now, except until more recently. Neighbors submitted a statement as well, saying that he can see into her unit from his, and he had not seen any evidence of anyone living in the unit until more recently, with the lights off and off. The hearing officer found that Ms. Sedal-Afar had failed to meet her burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence in the record before the board that she had lived on the property as her principal residence since at least July 11th, 2018. Staff sees no error in the hearing officer's finding and recommends that the board adopt her findings, except to correct a typo in finding 20, which is detailed in staff's report.
Thank you. With no clarifying questions, we'll move on to our speakers list. We have 6 speakers on this item. So I'll call you by 3. The first 3 speakers, if you could line up, are Peter Magadini, Eliza Sedal-Afar. I'm apologizing for not graceful pronunciation. I believe this is Nahid Sedal-Afar. And that's the first 3.
This guy here,
Mm-hmm.
he would want to go last because he may not speak.
Oh, okay.
And then there's also
I believe this is the applicant.
right, and he can speak.
So, okay, so the applicant will speak first, actually. And Zach Krosner will be next up. Peter Magadini may or may not speak last.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Eliza Sedal-Afar. I appreciate you guys taking the time today to further hear me out and reviewing this matter. I first want to start off by saying why I chose to live at this property and why I purchased it. One of the few main reasons was one, my office is on Ocean Park Boulevard, which is Santa Monica, and my partner's home, whose home office we work out of often, is in Mar Vista. So this allowed me to be closer to work. Also, my sister and brother-in-law, who live 1 block away, when we decided to purchase the property, she was pregnant. Her son is now 1 year old, and we're very close. And since she didn't have a nanny or any childcare, this allowed me to be close to her to help her out, because her husband works, quite often during, late into the day, and isn't able to come home to help with bath time or dinner or just simply watching the baby while my sister can take care of personal or household items. The other reason is, I have never lived on my own. This is my first time moving out of the home. I've been saving money since I graduated college. I've lived in LA for about 9 years now, and over the past few years, I've wanted to move to Santa Monica for the reasons I just mentioned. But one of the reasons I hadn't felt comfortable moving out until recently is because I've been living with my mom, and I didn't feel comfortable leaving her alone because she is a widower. My father passed away about 8 years ago. So it didn't sit well with me for me to just have her be home alone at night and eating dinners by herself and just simply not having anyone there. So that was one of the reasons I just didn't feel comfortable moving out until now. I want to further explain some of the items that were mentioned on the recommendation by the hearing officer. Over the course of the application process, I've submitted a multitude of pieces of evidence in support of my occupancy at this property. I want to stress that the evidence I've submitted have been factual and objective and can all be verified. It doesn't solely consist of hearsay and verbal testimonies. For this reason, I believe this evidence should be given significantly more weight. I've submitted 60 days worth of video footage from the Ring doorbell app. The Ring app only, their servers only go back 60 days, or else I would have provided the full 120 days. But nevertheless, it clearly illustrates that I occupy my unit. I've also submitted furniture and other miscellaneous deliveries, invoices, utility bills, my phone records, car registration, and voting records. I would like to address a few statements that were included in the recommendation to the board which were inaccurate. The recommendation stated that I did not vote in Santa Monica in the November election. This is incorrect. In fact, I voted here in this building downstairs during the election. And all that statement was provided to you guys as part of the evidence with my reply to the hearing officer's recommendation. The recommendation stated that there were only 12 or so phone calls per month made from a cell phone tower based in Santa Monica. However, this only represents outgoing calls and does not take into account all of my incoming calls as well. The recommendation stated that I didn't have linens, towels, or personal items. However, I pointed out at the initial hearing that the investigator did not open up all the closets and drawers and failed to see my personal and intimate items or shoes and coats, which were in the coat closet. He also mentioned there was no towels and linens, which at the first hearing I pointed out in one of the photos he had taken that there were in fact towels and linens. The recommendation places significant weight on the tenant's testimony and the declaration provided by the tenants from a third-party neighbor stating that I had only made myself present at the unit over the past 2 weeks. However, the Ring video footage that I provided shows actual footage of me in my unit for a duration of 60 days. Notably, when I presented the footage at the second hearing, the tenants changed their testimony by stating that I've only been there over the last 60 days. This statement by the tenants directly contradicts their earlier testimony that had only been present for the last 2 weeks. For this reason, I urge the board to place substantially less weight on their testimony and declarations in this regard. As I'm sure you've seen in my reply to the recommendation by the hearing officer, which I submitted to the board on Monday, there are further details with many more pieces of objective evidence clearly supporting my owner occupancy. Overall, I strongly believe the totality of the evidence presented by me clearly indicates that I've been occupying my unit as my primary residence since June of 2018. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear me out. That's it. Thank you.
I actually just have one question for you.
Yes.
What was the date specifically that you moved into this unit?
It was June 12th or 15th, one of those. It was mid-June.
Okay. Okay, thank you. The next speaker is Nahid. Please, thank you.
Hello, my name is Nahid. I'm Eli's mom. She living with me whole during the life. After June, she moved, and she saved money that time with me. Now she wants to purchase the property, and she did, and now I'm by myself and she's by herself at her house. Want to say good luck to her, and she want to be by herself and see what they're doing. But I cannot do anything.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Zach Krosner. And Then after that, we have Jonathan Nick Farjam and Nellie Nick Farjam. Thanks.
Good evening to the board members. My name is Zachary Krosner. I am Ms. Sedegatfar's boyfriend. I'm an attorney, and ironically, a significant percentage of my practice is representing tenants, not landlords. So as you can imagine, I do have a profound respect for tenants' rights statutes, city, state, and housing laws. I'd like to say on that regard that my office gets a lot of calls on matters, tenant matters, every day, and we are forced to turn down many of them because upon further investigation, we see that our conclusion is that landlords comply. And I can tell you firsthand with 100% certainty that that is the case here. As Elisa's boyfriend, obviously I'm very aware of where she resides currently and where she's resided in the past. And I was her boyfriend in June of 2018 as well. And I actually physically helped her move into her property in June of 2018, moving furniture. I also helped her purchase a lot of the furniture in her place and actually purchased her a television as a housewarming gift, which has been hanging in her living room since around June, maybe early July of 2018. Given our relationship, she obviously spends time at my apartment, which is a little bit in Century City, Beverly Hills, and on occasion sleeps over. But of course, I also sleep at her place and spend time at her place as well. The Sedegatfar family, I can say firsthand, is very close. They are very warm, welcoming, and moreover, a very close-knit family, and they do spend a significant amount of time together, especially given their close proximity, like Elisa had said already. And Elisa does spend time at her mom's and her brothers and sisters who have young nephews and nieces. But I can absolutely say, again, with 100% certainty, that Ms. Sedegatfar does not reside at my apartment, does not reside at her mother's or her brothers and sisters, but solely has been residing as her primary residence and only residence since June of 2018 at the Broadway residence. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jonathan Nick Farjam.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. I'm Lisa's brother-in-law, and Nellie is my wife. As everyone's already mentioned, I had actually, Nellie and I both had helped Elisa buy this property because we live just one block away. We're on Colorado. At the time, we were pregnant. We had kind of a rough pregnancy, to say the least, but thankfully our son is now 1 year old. Today's actually his birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. Yeah. So this for us, everything couldn't have actually worked out any better. What kind of was the scenario before was that Nellie and Elisa lived at Nahid's house, at their mom's house. She has a 2-bedroom condo, and they actually shared the same room together. And then obviously, whenever I married Nellie, her and I got our place in Colorado. And then with time, Elisa was able to come in, and move to Broadway, and she really helps a lot. If you go take a look at Nahid's place now, there's actually a big crib there because, that's what's happened to that old room. I can tell you that, Elisa has been a tremendous help. She's been amazing. Generally speaking, my son has to go to bed at like 6 every night, and they're bathing him together around 5:30. I work long hours. It's really been amazing, and I can tell you that, with full certainty that she lives at that property as her primary residence, no question about it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nellie McFarjam.
Hello, I'm Nellie. Thanks for hearing us out today. I'm also the property manager at 2718 Broadway. So in the recommendation, Mr. Koreski pointed out a few items that are not addressed to Elisa's address at 2718 Broadway, such as the property tax bill as well as the water bill. And that's because I'm responsible for paying all of those, as well as I collect the rent checks, so all the rent checks are also addressed to my property. So that's the reason why those aren't addressed to Elisa at her property. I also have text messages that we also submitted to you guys on Monday regarding some of my conversations with the tenant, telling her that Elisa does live upstairs and that if she ever needs to move her car, which blocks one of the tenant's garages, she can just call her or text her and she can go upstairs, and Elisa can come right downstairs and move the car, and that dates back to July. In addition, I'd like to emphasize the fact that Elisa has been a lifesaver in being able to help me since my son was born. As my husband mentioned, today is actually his first birthday, and honestly, I can say without Elisa if Elisa wasn't living close to me, I don't think I would have made it to today, because it's been a very difficult 1 year that we've gone through. So I call her at 7 in the morning to come over, so she walks right over, and sometimes she's there until like 8 o'clock when my husband comes home. So it's been really helpful, and I can tell you guys with full confidence, again, Elisa has been living there since June, and one of the biggest reasons why we purchased this property and worked so hard at getting it was so that Elisa could be closer to me, since my mom lives so close to West Hollywood and not really that close to me. So I urge you guys to please reconsider, and thank you again for hearing us out today.
And I believe our last speaker is Peter Magadini.
Hello. A little nervous, excuse me. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us today, and I appreciate what the Siddagathers had said. They're a very nice family, but unfortunately nothing that they've said hasn't been considered in the hearings that we've already had. They are talking about things that have really just been happening since October. The problem is July, June, and August, July, August, and September, there really wasn't anybody living there. We've had a person who lived in that apartment before, who was actually a doctor, an on-call doctor, and she would never really be in the apartment, but when she was home, we knew she was home because the doors, the walls and the doors and everything, it's an old apartment, you can hear everything in the apartment. And really, I appreciate that they would like to raise our rent, and what landlord would not. But the thing is that the evidence in the hearing speaks for itself. You guys have a really very thorough board and people working for you, and they did a bang-up job, and they really got everything pretty well. And we just ask that you follow the recommendation of the hearing officer. And I don't know. I don't know. Everything, like the ring doorbell evidence that she's put in, it's only since October. And really, we weren't saying that she wasn't there in October. We've always said she wasn't there in October. She's been there. And when she lives there for the full 120 days, we will not, dispute anything. We would just like her to follow the law. And thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We have no more speakers, so we will move into discussion. Our first speaker is Commissioner Foster.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who made an effort to come out and tell us about your situation. So a couple things I'm going to do with my time is ask a couple clarifying questions of staff, both for my own benefit and for that of the public, and then a couple thoughts on the case. Staff, is it true, I've never had to consider this question for myself, do we apply the same standard to intention to return or intention to occupy to an owner moving in anew, as we might to a tenant in a tenant not in occupancy case. The intent to return, even though you might be, let's just say, over at your sister's a lot or over at your mom's a lot, but you intend to live in your unit. Do we apply that standard to this case in the same way that we do tenant not in occupancy cases?
Yes, in both cases, the question is the unit the person's domicile, basically? Is it their principal residence?
Thank you. And then also, can you please clarify that the accomplishment of an exemption for an owner occupancy in a building of 3 or fewer units is strictly exemption or decontrol, essentially, of the property from rent control charter activities, and until such time as the owner moves off. There is nothing else achieved by an exemption. We don't expel the owner if we don't approve the exemption. We don't undo anything they're doing. It's just that so control is the only benefit of exemption. Isn't that true?
Yes, the board has no authority to say whether an owner can live there.
Right. Okay. So I have to say, I believe you own the property. I believe the applicant, probably intends to live there forever, for the foreseeable future. But the only standard I'm allowed to consider is because the burden is on the owner, and it's not, when weighing things, we do weigh intent to return, which is why I sought to clarify how we determine our determination as an appellate, quasi-appellate judicial body of your intention. It is our job to sort of suss that out, and I don't doubt that your intention, for me personally, is for you to live here. And I don't doubt that you could live there full-time and spend a lot of time with your nephew and your mother, and that would make it appear like you weren't at the apartment very often. I get that. I do. I don't see... I think what I'm leaning in favor of is that you're just going to have to wait and prove it in a clean, clear 120 days. I don't have the option of just believing you or not believing you. I have to apply the standard of seeing incontrovertible proof of 120 days solid of living there. And the thing is, you may feel that my opinion is in error or cruel, but I think the only thing I would point out is that we've seen, we see hundreds of these. There's 3 and 4 a month, 2 and 3 a month, every single month, year after year after year after year after year, and 99% of them are just crystal clear. So when they're not crystal clear, and we also have the word of a very reliable sources of information, all of the utilities and the belongings and this, that, and the other, and the circumstances and the testimony and everything. So I understand placing weight on your intention, and I believe your intention. I do. But I think the preponderance on the other side, it needs to be crystal clear, or else we're going outside of the bounds of what we're allowed to do in granting it. So my inclination at this time is to uphold the staff's opinion.
Do you have any, Commissioner Sultan, would you like to speak or would you like to defer to... I was in the queue, but I want to give you a chance to speak if you want to.
I'm happy to speak.
Yeah.
I agree with Commissioner Foster to a large extent. It sounds like you live in the unit and have lived there for at least a few months, but it doesn't sound like we have that preponderance of evidence that we need for that critical period between at least June 11th through, July, through October. I'm considering the evidence regarding the gas. It sounds like not enough gas was used there during those months to indicate that someone lives there. I know it sounds like you're not using a gas heater, maybe even not so much the stove, but even if you're just using, like showering or something like that, that would use more gas to indicate that somebody's actually living in the apartment. So that, to me, suggests that during that period, a person wasn't using it as their primary residence, because you certainly shower in your primary residence. And also the ring data that you provided doesn't cover that period. It only goes back to October 8th. So I'm not really seeing evidence for that time period. And then we have this evidence from tenants indicating that you might not have lived there during that time. So I'm again thinking that this might be something that will be back before the board in the not too distant future, once you've lived there a bit longer.
I actually have a few follow-up questions, I think, for the applicant. I realized that she was released, but could I ask her those now? I think it's okay. Okay. So could you please approach the podium? So I think it's very clear among us that you definitely live in the apartment now, that you've lived there since October, that, under the present conditions, it seems very compelling that you would qualify. The real issue is this June, July period. Do you acknowledge, I guess, in the record that there is less strong evidence of you living there during that time period?
I agree that, I think the biggest thing is that if I could have gotten 120 days of ring footage, I would have, but I literally had to subpoena the law offices of the ring to give me timestamped videos, because the videos themselves are not timestamped when you just pull it up, or when you download it, they're not timestamped. So I had to subpoena the office, the ring company, to send me that data, and their server, they only save up to 60 days. So even my ring footage that I sent to you guys right now, that's until December 6th. If I go and subpoena them right now, they can only go back to December 14th, which makes it 60 days. So there was no way for me to provide any more ring footage. But I do want to say that, they mentioned the gas usage is 6 therms, but I was clearly in the unit in October, and so forth, and it was the same amount of usage of therm. So I don't really see why that would be more held.
So I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I understand. So you're saying that the amount of therms that you...
So you guys are saying that it's clear that I've been living there since October, because I provided that video footage of you guys, but you guys are saying that the therm usage was low in the months, in the bills that I provided to you guys.
Well, just wait.
So it's the same amount of usage, maybe a therm or two higher. It's between 6 and 9 therms.
Well, I'm just going to clarify. So this is, and the reason, we don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
But the reason why this is important is we sit as a quasi-judicial body.
Sure.
And there are rules that govern us in terms of the evidence that we can consider. Mm-hmm. And both that, there are different rules for evidence considered on something like this, which is an application, and then also evidence for an appeal.
Sure.
And because this is an initial application, not an appeal, there are different rules necessarily for what consists of the record. So my first question is the October gas usage in the record, and is it consistent with the prior gas usage? And then my second question is, to the extent that we're eliciting testimony that's not necessarily reflected in the record, what weight do we give to that, if anything, just so it's clear for the board?
Can I also just make one clarification about the...
when he's done.
You can administer the oath, and people can testify, and you can give it the same weight as you would give any other oral sworn testimony.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because it's not an appeal. Okay.
Can I just clarify that as far as the gas usage, I don't have a gas heater in my unit. I actually capped it off because it was leaking gas when I moved into the unit, and the pilot would just turn it off and on. So I don't have gas heat. The only gas appliance I have in my unit is a stove.
So just so you understand what's happening now,
Sure.
It sounds like some of the testimony that we're eliciting could be helpful to your case.
Sure.
But in order for us to consider it, we have to swear you in under oath. So that means they'll explain it to you, but it means that you're speaking under penalty of perjury. and that means that testimony is, even if it's not in the record, it's something that we can consider.
Okay.
So is that something that you're willing
Sure.
to do?
Yeah.
Okay, can you administer the oath, please?
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you are about to give in this proceeding shall be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
So we were talking about the gas usage
Yes.
and the gas usage in the summer months versus the gas usage in October.
Sure.
And can you explain whether that gas usage was consistent or not?
It was consistent, and at least by the bills that I pulled off online, they're consistent. They're anywhere between 6 to 9.
Okay. Is that, and I'm just going to ask our counsel to direct us where in the record we can find that.
Commissioners, Exhibit 1, pages 15 through 19 are the gas bills in question, which cover a period from May 22nd through October 23rd. From May 22nd to June 21st, the gas usage was 6 therms.
Okay.
This would be basically before, apparently, she claimed to have moved in.
Okay.
June 21 through July 23rd was 8 therms. July 23 through August 22nd was 7. August 22nd to September 20th was 8. September 20th through October 23rd was 9. That's the record that's in there.
Okay, so around June it did go up about 2 therms, so about 33%.
Something like that.
Okay. You know, I'm still struggling a little bit, but I do find your testimony and the testimony of your family compelling. I guess my question is, you know, what do you think is your best evidence, your best proof that you were living in a unit from June, in June, July, and August? Because those are really the months that are giving me pause.
Well,
sorry.
So
Well,
July.
you said you moved in June. But
I moved in June, but the 120 days goes back to July, from the date of the application that I applied. I think the best would be, I mean, if you get, it just seems like you guys are putting such high emphasis on my gas usage. So I think the fact that the gas usage was the same from, you know, July to October, September, November that I submitted, and I have clear footage that I was living in my unit from October onwards, that the gas usage didn't change. That is clear evidence that I've been living in the unit.
How many nights did you sleep there per week, do you think, in July after you moved in?
I would say 5 to 6 nights. I sleep at my boyfriend's, 1 to 2 nights a week.
Okay. Do you sleep anywhere else?
No.
Do you have any other explanation for the fact that the Verizon data shows just 45 nights were spent in the Santa Monica unit between July and November?
The Santa Monica, the Verizon bills only account for outgoing calls. It doesn't show that if an incoming call was made and I was in the Santa Monica unit, it doesn't show the cell phone tower that it's going off of.
How do you know that?
Because you can clearly see that it's only for outgoing calls, but it shows the tower. The origination is only for an outgoing call.
Will you remind us how many calls we're talking about? Because I'm getting confused as to which part of the evidence you're referring to.
This was on
Which page?
15.
Oh, right.
Obviously, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't, I'm having a hard time understanding why it would show so many outgoing calls when you're in other places like LA, West Hollywood, Beverly Hills, but then all of your incoming calls are when you're at home. Like I don't understand. That pattern doesn't quite make sense to me, but perhaps counsel can.
If I could point to how the hearing officer came up with his conclusion. So just read a little bit from page 14 of the decision. Ms. Sedagat also provided detailed information from Verizon that shows date, time, and origination of each of her iPhone calls for 5 30-day billing periods beginning June 24th, 2018. The record shows heavy use of the phone on a daily basis, with calls having been made or received late in the evening and early morning. A review of the statements provides some information on when Ms. Sedagat was in Santa Monica late in the evening on a particular day, and then early in the morning the next day, suggesting that she spent the night in the unit. Using this approach, the statements for the period June 24th to July 23rd shows just 12 nights, where the last call originated in Santa Monica, as did the first call the following morning. And then it continues for the next period. There were just 4 nights were spent in the unit. For the period of August through 24 through September 23, 14 nights, and September to October 23, 15 nights, and for the period October 24 through November 23rd, 12 nights were spent in the unit. So the basis in which the hearing officer concluded that was by looking at when the last call of the night and for the first call in the morning.
And just for clarity on the board, because even I'm confused on this right now, what is our standard of review of the hearing officer's recommendation? Do we review everything for the first time as if we're seeing the facts for the first time, or do we owe some deference to the hearing officer?
Hearing examiner's recommendation is really just that. It's just a recommendation. The board is the decision maker.
Okay, so this is like de novo, like we're looking at it fresh.
Yes.
Okay.
The board can't discount sworn testimony and evidence that was appropriately provided, but you're not bound by any conclusion, and you're not required to give any deference to the hearing examiner's conclusions.
Okay. And with 3 of us only present, does she need 3 votes? Yes, in the affirmative. If it's 2-1 or 1-2.
In the absence of a board decision granting or denying within 90 days, the application is granted. So
it has to be unanimous.
So it has to be unanimous.
Right. It has to be. Yeah, it has to be 3. Yes.
Either way.
Well, if the board doesn't reach a unanimous decision, then it is granted.
Okay.
Say that last part again.
Unless the board denies it, then
by 3 votes.
The board can only act by a majority of its members. So on an occasion like this, when there are 3 members present, the board can only take a valid action by a unanimous decision.
So are you still holding the mic, or can we keep discussing?
We can keep discussing. I'm
And
not
do you want to
there
hold
yet.
the witness any longer?
Unless other folks have questions, people might, but I'll turn it over.
Well, okay. I'll ask her a couple, just one short question since we've got her up here. Hi. Sorry for all of this. I know it's important to you, but that's kind of my thing. So I have a 2-part question. One is something I was trying to get at earlier is that all of our owner occupancy exemptions from rent control, there's really only one result of that, and that's being able to raise the rents and not use the petition process, not have to use the petition processes and things that the rent control charter offers. So if you were to be denied tonight and had to come back, in just several short weeks and do it again, 120 days and do it again, that's our process. So you do what for a living again?
I'm a realtor.
You're a realtor. Okay, so the only thing I would say about these phone calls, for instance, as opposed to therms and amount of makeup and hair, depending on what lack of window treatments and all these things, it's not just therms or just phones, but I'm the daughter of 2 realtors. if there were that many mornings in June and July in Santa Monica and the office is in Ocean Park and you're a realtor for a living, you're on the phone constantly. So it's not that I don't believe that you don't live there now. I really think you do. I believe you do. And I have a 3-year-old. I wish I had a sister living that close that could come and help me. I just think it's not that we want to or don't want to. It's just as simple as we don't yet have every I dotted and every T crossed, and we owe it to the charter and to the oath we took to uphold the charter to follow it by the letter. And even though Commissioner Phillips is right that we get to hear this de novo and hear testimony and make our own interpretations of the hearing officer's recommendation, I still feel that even within that, the charter is clear. We need clear, incontrovertible preponderance, and I don't feel it. We don't have it. So I think the worst that's going to happen to you is that we just come back and probably grant it to you in a very short period of time. But it's just, there's too many questions. It's not clear, and it needs to be clear. Thank you.
Do you have anything?
I mean, I still don't see, this is for questions, I guess. I mean, yeah, for myself, I still don't see that evidence that you live there during that time. It sounds like, and the critical period that we're discussing, right? July, August, September. I think that you probably spent some nights there. I know I saw that text message about maybe your first night there on July 20th, which I noted was after the period that started on July 11th. So if anything, I think that text message indicates that maybe you spent the night there for the first time.
I wouldn't say that indicates that was the first night I spent the night there.
Well, the neighbor indicated that she'd never seen that car before, and so it seemed like it was a new thing that was happening. Oh, there's a strange car in my parking place. So to me, that actually kind of went in the other direction. And I'm not seeing that evidence in the record. I don't see the Uber Eats receipts.
Where's the text message?
Oh, so that was in the new submission that we got, which I guess we can consider. So that was.
Where is it?
So
part of it's on the last page of her statement.
It's noted as Exhibit E, Commissioners.
Yeah, hi, Nellie.
But it doesn't say But it doesn't say she lived there for the first time, right? It just says that there was a Lexus blocking it.
Right. So it seems like the neighbor had never seen that car in her parking place again. So this to me doesn't indicate that she already lives there at that date.
Well, and you can park the car on the street too, but as mentioned in the hearing, is that if you get there past a certain amount of time, there isn't really much street parking, and I would park in front of the garage if there was no street parking.
So to me, what it sounds like a little bit is, and let me know if this kind of is coming together, or what, I guess, like what your best response is to this. It looks like for the period from July 11th to July 24th, it looks like it was sort of look, everyone has moved into an apartment before. And I understand, especially if you have family nearby, it can be a drawn out thing, right? It can take a little bit longer. And then I know that you had a trip to Europe from the 24th to mid-August,
early August, yeah,
right? Which would explain why people aren't seeing you during that time period, and that doesn't obviously affect your domicile, right?
Right.
And then after August, I think then I still haven't seen much evidence that you're there. But I could understand why people aren't seeing you during that time period. I guess I'm really struggling. I'm really trying to get there, but there does seem, we've had sworn testimony from multiple tenants in the building who've just said, look, we really didn't see her during the time period. I'm really trying to hear all the evidence here.
I just want to point something out that was that the tenants sworn in on during the first hearing, they mentioned that they had only I had only made myself present over the last 2 weeks, which the hearing officer has noted in his recommendation. However, at the second hearing, when I submitted the ring footage and they realized it was only 60 days of ring footage, they went on to say, well, she's only been there for the last 60 days, not 120 days. And that just contradicts their statement from the initial hearing that I've only been there for the past 2 weeks, whereas at the second hearing with new evidence provided that said, oh, well, she's only been there for the last 60 days.
Okay.
Can we see where we're at? If we call for, if I make a motion for a vote, that's it, right? And if we are not unanimous.
I don't mean to belabor it, and I know that this. Okay. Right now, I am not inclined to grant this, but my mind is not fully made up. So, like, I'm asking you, right at this point, what do you think? Like, give me your best 3 pieces of evidence that you think really show that you were there during the time period from July 11th to the beginning of September, which is really what we're talking about.
Sure. I think, the Therm usage is, the same throughout the months that I've been living there.
Well, hold on. But the evidence was only, that you mentioned in the record, was only up to the beginning of October, not October, November, or December, so we don't really have anything to compare
During
it
the
to.
initial hearing, I believe I submitted November as well.
I didn't hear that when because that would have.
It goes through almost the end of October, the gas bills.
And also, like.
But not the cold months.
Right, which would be off anyway. Kind of hard to compare.
Right, so I mean, it's not compelling. That October is one therm different than September is not
right,
compelling.
Because I don't
to
have
me.
a gas heater. I have a space heater that I use because the gas was leaking when I moved in, so we just removed the wall heater altogether.
Okay, so you have the gas and then.
So I have the gas. My place is fully furnished. It has a couch, 2 chairs, a coffee table, a kitchen table, a TV, a bed. I mean, I don't know when the hearing officers mentions sparsely furnished, what that means. I'm not sure what else I'm supposed to have in there. Wall art, everything. You guys have to understand that this is my first time living on my own. I had to start from scratch to buy all new furniture, and furniture is very expensive. It's not cheap, and I had already put a lot of money down to purchase this property. I still have expenses that I need to take care of as well. I can't just, go buy frivolous, artwork and things like that to put up in my house. As far as, cosmetic stuff goes, I have shampoo, I have conditioner, I have face wash, I have soap. And when he says minimal toiletries, I'm not sure how that can be defined as minimal. I'm one person. And as far as, dishes and food, I'm one person. I don't cook that often. It's hard to cook one person. I pick up a lot of prepared food. I eat at my sister's. I eat at my mom's. I don't know how her hearing investigator can, say that it's sparsely furnished or sparsely cabinets or sparsely filled or toiletries are sparse when that's kind of, to your opinion. And you have to understand, I'd only been living there for 6 months. I'm not sure how much more I could.
When did you change your voter registration?
I actually, when I came here to vote, I had walked in and I said, look, I'm not sure if I'm,
That's after the period.
have applied to change my voter registration. They said, no problem, just sign here because my name was on the list and you can still go ahead and vote, which I went forward and did.
Okay, so the only reason I'm asking that is just like if you had said, well, I changed it in June, that would have been like a help.
No, I just want to say I didn't vote during the last presidential election, so it just wasn't something that was on top of mind to go change my voter, registration. But I still voted here in Santa Monica during the election.
Mm-hmm. So again, for me, we've got multiple things, whether it's therms or phones or window blinds, which to women, it's pretty significant, and whether it's not, it's book. The point is, all of these things by themselves are not a big deal. And it's not that I disbelieve anything she said. I don't. But I just think we have a standard we're supposed to meet unequivocally or with very little doubt, and it's not met. And it's not the end of the world. We can do this again very soon. I just think that the standard is pretty clear, and there are too many things that are slightly unclear, which tip the balance.
So my last question, I guess. So you said your best evidence is the gas, what was your second one?
My place being furnished, my...
when did you order the furniture?
It was all ordered in June. It was all delivered by mid to end of June.
Okay.
And it's all in the evidence that I provided before the first hearing when I submitted my application.
And sometimes when we ask these questions, it's because we get a summary and
Sure.
then there's the hearing record. So it's not
Right.
that we aren't being diligent. It's just that.
Right.
Okay. And then what's like your third best piece?
I mean, I don't know what else to say other than I live there. I don't know what other evidence I can come up with or pull out of thin air to prove that I've lived there.
Have you ever gotten like a parking ticket or?
Never gotten a parking ticket, no.
Okay.
My car is registered to my property, and that's been registered way before. It is in my mom's name, but it's registered to 2722 Broadway.
When did you register that?
It's been registered since I moved.
Which
in
was
June.
In June. So
Yeah.
that's when you registered it?
Yes,
Did you
and
put
that's
that in the record?
and
It's in the
I
record.
didn't submit it with my application, but the hearing officer mentioned that not the hearing officer, the investigator said that there was no record of a car registration to my name, and that's because it's in my mom's name, but it's to my address.
It's and you did provide that.
Then that
evidence?
is provided in. Right,
But it's still at that address.
Yeah, it's my car though. Doesn't matter who it's
Okay. I mean, honestly, guys, I kind of think she lived there. Like even back in June. I mean, I think like the time period.
I just don't see.
I don't see it.
What evidence besides what evidence?
No.
Well,
Sorry.
wait.
unless you're called.
The evidence that she lived there June 11th. Besides, July.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You can still have the witness here if you have more questions for her, but if you've moved to board discussion, it's just to avoid interruptions and things. You should probably excuse the witness.
Sure. So I think we can excuse the witness. Thank you.
Thank you.
So look, the reason why I think that it's compelling is from the period before, you have therms at, right, they were very, very low, right? And then you have an uptick to, I think, what, 6 to 8, in that.
Indicates she was spending more time there, but not that, sorry.
Yeah. Look, like, I think it's a really close call. I don't think either, I mean.
So if it's
I'm
a close
kind of
call,
coming out-
what's the worst thing that happens? I'm just asking for argument's sake, a healthy argument's sake. If the worst thing that happens is a little bit more time goes by till she gets to decontrol the property, I don't think there's any damage to her tenancy or her ownership or her residency to get it right. And to hold her to the same standard that we've held every single other owner occupant to, when it, like I said, it's 90% of the time it's crystal clear. And so when it's not, that's usually when we take a second look and we ask them to help us be perfectly clear, which is, honoring the law.
Yeah.
If I understand correctly, the standard is preponderance of the evidence, which is more than a close call, right? A close call is kind of like 50-50, but if we have to get to preponderance, that means that, that's more than 50.
But I mean, so here's what I see. I see contradicting evidence that from tenants that say, well, we didn't really see her that much. We have an explanation, at least for that period from July to August, where she was out of the country, right? So then we're into August. Some of the tenant testimony, I think is compelling and should be given weight. There seems to be at least some issues with the recollection of the time period because, she obviously has documented this with a Ring doorbell, right? So she,
she documented it going back
50% of it.
Right.
No, that's a third. It goes back to October.
But it also goes to the credibility, not the credibility, just the ability to recollect in the accurate time period, right? I think actually the gas bill is pretty compelling because if you see, I mean, like going up in a gas bill 33%, and I'm trying to understand this, Therms. Was this for just the unit or the entire building?
And the laundry facility. So in other words, when the tenants are using the laundry every single 2 or 3 days, as they as all of them always have, then you add her presence in her apartment and her laundry to theirs, it should go up more than 1 therm.
But that's 1 to 2 therms is about like 33% in a 3-unit building. Like that actually makes sense to me.
Well, do we know what do we know what the average therms are in another unit of a similar size?
Commissioners, in the hearing officer's decision on page 19, the hearing officer states baseline allowance on the 5 bills submitted ranges between 14 and 16 therms.
All right, I wish I had my bill here. I mean,
I know
that's
because
a very
mine is
low.
always extremely low too. Like mine is very, very low.
I think if we're talking though about a delta, a change that indicates presence, 1 to 2 is not
But that's
significant.
a 33%
But 2 to
uptick.
6 is what percentage jump?
2
And 6 and 8 to 9 is only a tiny jump.
Yeah, but that's after she was already there.
I don't know. We're just really splitting hairs at this point, and I don't see the harm. I'm firm in my position. I don't see the harm in asking the applicant to meet the standard at a total, complete preponderance of.
Yeah, but a preponderance is only 50 plus 1, and if I'm saying I find her credible,
Well, then
I
that's
find
your
the
vote.
Therms.
Then I guess somebody should make a motion for a vote. I move we accept the staff's report and deny it the application for owner occupancy exemption at this time, with the knowledge that the applicant can come back and get this process done in the future. Is there a second?
I second that motion.
Sorry.
We call you're chairing. You got to call the vote.
Oh, sorry. We'll go to a vote.
Commissioners, however you do decide this, if you could also make sure to make the typo correction that's in the staff's recommendation.
Yes, noted.
And I also want to make clear about something that's in the evidence. In the written response, Ms. Sedorat said that her the number of therms that she used was 2 before she moved in. That is actually not in evidence. The earliest date bill that we have in evidence is May 22nd through June 21st, and that was for 6 therms. So,
Okay.
just so you know.
Yep. Yeah. So it went up like a third. Okay. All right. So we'll call a roll.
Commissioner Salton,
Yes.
and Commissioner Foster,
Yes.
Commissioner Phyllis.
No.
Motion motion fails.
So council, can you explain
Yes.
what that meant?
The board can do one of two things. They can continue to discuss it and try to reach a unanimous vote if the board thinks that that's possible. But again, the board can act in this instance only unanimously, because for any official action that the board takes, it's got to be by a quorum. Not a quorum of those present, but a quorum of the entire board. If the board fails to make a decision, then the board has not acted on the application, and then it becomes automatically granted by virtue of failure to act.
So I just want to failure to act. So I just want to clarify my reasoning to see if I can bring anyone along, which is I think the Therm usage is compelling. So can you please tell us the Therm usage from May to June and then June to July again, please?
We start out in May at 6 therms, and by October we are at 9 therms. Essentially, in between, it zigzags a little between 8 and 7, and so forth.
So there's not a whole lot of variation, but it did go up. I want to have it be really clear because I think you can still get to a preponderance if something's a close call. I mean, a preponderance is 51% or 50 plus 0.1. You know, it's not. But I just want to make it very clear because I take owner occupancy exemptions very seriously, and especially when we have to disregard evidence, I think it's important to be clear in our reasoning. So the reason why I can't get there is because I found the speaker's testimony very credible. I found the fact that she, registered the vehicle that she was using as her car to the address early on as demonstrative of an intent to return to the domicile, and that being her permanent domicile. I don't think that she had the intent to return anywhere else other than this address. I think she probably, I think that's demonstrated and corroborated in both the Therm usage, the usage of the apartment, the registration of the vehicle, and I found her really credible this evening. So that's why I just can't get there on the preponderance. I'm sorry, guys. So we have 2 speakers. Do you all still want to speak?
Yeah, I just put it in.
Sorry. Commissioner Sultan? Okay. Commissioner Foster?
So if I go through this gas usage, I'm not 51+% on that. If we go to investigator's report, I'm definitely I give that a lot of weight because he's examined 1,000 of these, probably 1,000. Uber Eats is not consequential. People eat in different ways. It doesn't weigh on me one way or the other. Tenant's testimony does weigh. Usually we see that people typically don't come forward unless they feel, it's an antagonistic situation it puts between themselves and the landlord, and it's a big risk to take. So for people to attest in this strong of a manner typically means that they really feel strongly about it. In the vast majority of cases I've sat up here for, they don't protest in most of the cases. Mm-hmm. So that's a big preponderance chunk for me. And, the ring data is 50% complete and 50% incomplete, so that does not add to my preponderance pile. The Verizon phone records of a realtor should show, who is a realtor living and working in Santa Monica, should show far more calls than 4 in one of the 30-day periods originating on a night and a morning. So that is well above 50% of doubt for me. The voter registration is, some people don't vote a lot, and that's okay. So that's not a huge issue one way or the other for me. But so if you go through the category one by one, if we need 51% of that she definitely lives there to get to preponderance, it's clearly not there for me. And I think I just illustrated why it's not. But okay, regardless, I'm not going to change my vote on this. So even if the 2 of you do change, or even if Commissioner Sultan does, I'm stating unequivocally that I'm not going to, so I don't know that we need to continue with this.
Okay. So the items concluded, the board is not going to take an action, so unless there's some board meeting between now and the 16th of, or the 6th, right? The 6th of March, which there's not scheduled to be. The exemption, I guess, will be granted by board inaction. In this case, caused by a lack of consensus.
Commissioners, the reason I'm not immediately answering your question is because this actually was a case that was supposed to have been heard at an earlier meeting, but there was a waiver that was signed, and so I have to do by the applicant to allow the additional time for the consideration of this.
Well, then what I would ask is, there are only 3 of us sitting here tonight. I would move, if the waiver applies, that we continue this to our next meeting to see if we can get at least board action. Because Commissioner Torosis is recused, but if Commissioner Duran is with you guys, then it's not granted because of inaction, it's granted because of the consensus of the board, and I'll accept that.
There is a waiver of a 90-day time requirement, and the waiver was for 30 days. So
that would extend past March 6th, yeah?
the application was filed on October 31st. So it's essentially October 31st plus 90 plus another.
Plus 120?
So it's basically plus 120.
120 from 10/31. Let's figure it out.
Early March. Essentially end of February, I would think.
Sorry, I'm just doing it on my 10, 31, plus 30 days. Is anyone else doing this? Oh, sorry, 120. Then why does the decision deadline say March 6th? If it's February 28th.
I will tell you exactly what it is in one.
Okay. I have a question, actually, maybe for the applicant. In light of the fact that not the full board is not here this evening, would you be willing to continue the hearing to our March 2019 hearing, which is on March 14th? And if the hearing's continued, obviously evidence isn't closed. We can choose to accept evidence at that hearing too. So to the, I mean,
Are you saying is it her call?
well, she can choose to waive it. She can choose to waive it. Yeah. So what I'm saying is, look, right now there's not a board consensus.
So the answer is that with the waiver, the new deadline for board approval is February 28th.
So why does the report say decision deadline March 6th?
That's an error on the.
Okay.
It's actually the way you count it is from 10/31 plus 120, and that becomes February 28th.
Okay. So my question for the applicant is, there's not a board consensus right now. There's also a missing board member. What I would propose doing, because my other colleagues aren't moving on this, is seeing if we can continue the hearing to March 14th, where Commissioner Duran will also be present. At that time, you'll still have the opportunity to present evidence. We can swear you under oath the same way that we did in this circumstance. You obviously know the sticking point for other commissioners, but it is, I think, kind of a good faith opportunity to get everyone on board, but it's your decision.
Commissioner, if I could, I just actually, my originating date was incorrect, so the staff report is correct. It's March 6th is the decision deadline.
Okay, so March 6th, so it would be an extension of 8 days to try to get board consensus, but again, this is your decision.
I think I'd rather just leave it.
Okay.
As of today.
Okay. Should
we call Commissioner Terosis? Sorry.
That's it.
He has some paperwork for you. If you want to give it to him, do you want to give it to him, or do you want to make a comment? No. Okay.
Okay.
So maybe you can make some copies and give it to each of us.
Okay.
If that's possible.
Yeah, we
you
can
can stay or not. If you want to make a comment on the rent decrease, then you can.
This is on what item?
Just a general.
Oh, just a general. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
can you make a copy?
We're done with that. Okay. Okay, so moving on from 10A1, we're on 10B1 appeal at 2010 3rd Street. Do we want to hear a staff report? Please, a brief staff report.
Commissioners, this is the petitioner is Min Kang, who's a tenant in Unit 108. She's lived in that unit since 2011. Last July, her landlord switched her tandem parking space with another one that's 2 spaces over. Staff's report shows a picture of the old space, and 2 spaces to the right is the new space that has the blue car. Looks like a blue BMW in the rear. Ms. Kang claims that the new space is a reduction in the amenity provided by her old space and filed a rent decrease petition. To grant a decrease, the preponderance of the evidence must show a substantial reduction in the amenity. The board may not grant a decrease for a de minimis reduction because the board's power to grant decreases is based on the notion that a reduction is so great that it has made the tenant's rent unfair or given the landlord a greater than fair return. The evidence in the record shows that the new space is 16 feet further from the pedestrian exit, and it takes 30 seconds longer for the garage door to open. Ms. Kang conceded that these differences were minor or marginally inconvenient. The new space is the same length as the one that's two over, but the new one is 2 feet narrower. The photos, however, show that the new space is still adequately wide for Ms. Kang to park her car. That is why the hearing officer found the reduction in amenity to have been minimal and one that did not warrant a rent decrease. Now, in this matter, unlike the last one, the board is sitting as an appellate body. That means that it may overturn the hearing officer's finding if it was clearly erroneous. A board member may have decided the matter differently if they were the hearing officer themselves, but here the board may reverse the hearing officer's finding only if no reasonable person would have made that finding. Because the decision here includes no legal error and no factual findings that are not reasonably supported by the evidence, staff recommends that the board affirm the decision.
Thank you. Any questions about the staff report? Okay, seeing none, we have one public comment. Scott Brody from the property management agent. You have 3 minutes.
Parking spot. It designates we have to give parking to the tenant. We could actually, with a 30-day notice, change any spot of a building that doesn't actually have a designation on either the record of the building when it's built. Sometimes developers assign specific parking spaces, and it's denoted within the records of the city. Tenant signed an estoppel 2012. asking, the actual estoppel says, how many spaces and where the location. She didn't put location, she just put 2 parking spaces. The lease says we're to provide 2 parking spaces. The space we actually moved her to is wider than the space she had, and usually wider is better. Pardon?
We can't hear anything that's not in the record.
Actually, it indicates it in the hearing officer or the inspector who went out to measure the parking spaces.
Can you let us know? Yeah, me too.
The old spaces. I'm going to read straight from the staff report. It says the old space was 10 feet by 9 width.
Can you let us know what page that's on?
It's a front page.
Oh.
The new one is 8 feet by 10.5 width. So the width is bigger.
No.
10
feet 9 inches was reduced to 8 feet 10.5 inches. We cannot.
Okay. I thought it was. Okay.
We cannot consider anything not in the record.
You're right. Then it wasn't clearly written then. Okay, you're right. In any event, it's such a minimal amount of space. If you look at the pictures, the cars fit perfectly on both. When you open up the doors and parking 2 cars, she confirmed she only has 1 car anyways. And I believe she's not even here to present testimony.
It's not relevant.
That's it.
We can only consider facts in the appeal. Okay, thank you in the record. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, actually, I had a question, if that's okay. Regarding the space, Ms. King said that there was some storage in the back of her original parking space that I can't really see clearly from the pictures.
It's actually it's the owner's storage, which is part of why we moved it, because that's where the owner stores all his building materials.
Okay, just so I'm clear, so she was using the storage before for her own stuff, but then
she wasn't using that storage. So the storage space.
Is that in the record?
Because she indicated she was able to store bicycles and other items there.
That's just in front of her car. Behind it, though, is the owner's storage, which is the actual reason why it was moved. In front of every, you pull in and you can just, you don't park all the way in front.
So was the storage locked? Is that how she didn't?
No. Well, the building owner's storage is locked. It's a room. It's an actual room.
Oh, it's an actual whole room?
Yeah. It belongs to the owner of the building. Her storage she's talking about, it's not storage. It's just a space in front of her car, which she still has, and she still has a bike in front of it.
And okay, and then what about this pillar that she's claiming impedes her ability to park her car?
If you look at both pictures, both old and new have a pillar. In her original testimony, she only has 1 car, so parking 1 car wouldn't matter which spot she parked in.
Okay, Commissioner Foster, do you have questions? Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it does not appear as though we have any additional public comment. Commissioner Foster?
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to ask staff, and for the public's benefit, a question. Can you remind us the standard when we're considering parking? Parking is usually addressed in our law, specifically in certain cases, like is it included or not included? But when a landlord, unilaterally decides to change the location, is that allowed if it's exactly like for like, or is it, what are the circumstances around a landlord unilaterally changing amenities? Is that what you signed your lease for?
there is no law against, if it weren't possible to do things like this, the kinds of cases that the board hears frequently would never occur. The board's authority is to adjust rent to take into account any changes that occur. But if the question is it illegal to change an assigned spot? No, that's not. There's no law that prohibits that.
Okay, I just wanted that out there. So I have lived in multiple residences in my life, and changing parking spaces is a big deal to the tenant. It's a big deal, and whether or not you have to navigate around a column or a pillar or 2 feet narrower. I remember when I was looking at apartments, there was a garage I asked the landlord, can I test my car in this garage because it looks narrower than a standard garage, and I had to fold in my mirrors, to get in, and I had to pull all the way over to almost touching in order to open just the left door and never the right door. So I can see why this tenant is very upset about the random change. I'm not compelled by the evidence given that the estoppel wasn't specific enough. I don't sometimes think tenants understand legal documents and how important it is to be super specific. So I know that tenants don't like having amenities switched on them midstream. I don't think anyone would. But what we're here to decide is if it's worth a decrease in rent for 2 feet and a column. And while I totally empathize with the tenant and getting an amenity changed, I can't go by that standard. So the standard I'm going to have to go by is that of the hearing officer.
Thank you. Do we have any further comment? Oh, it looks like Commissioner Sultan.
I just had another question about the storage. So it sounds like she applied for the rent decrease for the loss of the parking space that she'd originally had. If she wanted to apply for a rent decrease because of loss of storage, would that be a different, would she have to do that separately?
Yes, she would have first have had to have had storage, and then if she had storage and it was taken away, then that would be a different. And so in this case, it appears, if you look at the photos, yes, sorry. Yes, it would be a separate one.
Okay. Meaning that can't even be something that we decide on because she didn't apply on that basis?
Correct.
Okay, so even if it were the case.
Okay, I'm prepared to make a motion if anyone else. Do you have a comment on this one? Okay, she's abstaining. Well, given the evidence in the record here, and that's what we have to consider, I do believe that the hearing officer's decision included no legal error, and therefore I move to adopt the findings of fact and conclusions of law herein. Can we call for a vote?
Commissioner Foster?
Yes.
Commissioner Sultan?
Yes.
Commissioner Phyllis?
Abstain.
And Commissioner Trosas?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. All right. Moving on to 10C1, which is a removal case at 1453 10th Street. May we please have a very short staff report?
Commissioner, the petitioner here is Magnolia Villas EAH, LLC. EAH purchased this 3-unit property at 1453 10th Street and an adjacent non-residential property at 1445 10th Street to build a 40-unit affordable housing project for seniors. It has applied to the board for a removal permit to demolish the 3 controlled units. The 3 units have been vacant for decades, according to EAH and the previous owner that they cite, which is consistent with board records. To qualify for a removal permit, EAH must show that the permits being sought for development of multifamily dwelling units. The new units are not exempt from rent control. Now here, the board has always interpreted this requirement in the past to apply to the new replacement units, of which there are 3 here, and that at least 15% of the new units will be at rents affordable to low-income households. Here, the applicant more than meets that requirement. 39 of the 40 units will be deed restricted to low-income units. In fact, they will be deed restricted for occupancy and at rents affordable to even lower income units. Low income is defined at 80% of area median income. Here, 15 units will be at 60%, 12 units will be at 50% of AMI, 8 at 40, and 4 at 30% of AMI. Because the proposed project satisfies the required criteria, staff recommends the board grant the removal permit.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Foster?
Rightly so. The community takes big notice when the Rent Control Board withdraws units from the market, and I think it's the staff report is excellent in explaining exactly why in this circumstance it's the right thing to do. These units have been...
My apologies. We have a speaker that I did not see or call up. My apologies.
Sure.
So sorry, Mr. Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is among us tonight. You have, I believe, are you representing the applicant here?
Yeah.
You have 5 minutes.
All right. Well, I'll try to keep it brief. I know we've been here a long time. But I just want to introduce myself, and I appreciate all of your time and staff's recommendation as well. Yeah, I do represent the owner. We're a 50-year-old nonprofit. We bought the property in order to develop affordable housing there. As far as we can tell, it's been vacant for at least 20 years. I was surprised to find out that even 3 units would be rent controlled, but I did run our pro forma based on that. I totally agree with everything staff said, and I just made a few notes that I want to reiterate a few things. Let's see. So in addition to that it's been vacant for so long, Haka mentioned that we would likely have a requirement to replace 15% of the units as affordable. We'll be doing 100% as affordable at much lower rents than required. This is a city-funded project, so we're working very closely with the housing department. And as I mentioned originally, the project essentially works best if none of the units are rent control. In long conversations with Haka, that doesn't seem possible. If it was possible, I would very much like to ask for that, because we have very thin margins. We are restricted for the next 55 years to the rents we're allowed to charge. But when we do raise them, they're according to what the tax credit committee will allow. And restricting 3 units does work for our pro forma, though barely. And so I would request that if that is the minimum you could do, that you grant us that, because any more than 3 units would make the project infeasible.
Can I ask you a question? Which nonprofit housing developer are you from?
We're EAH. So I know up until I showed up in town, there were only 2 affordable developers here.
No. There's lots of affordable developers. I'm not familiar with EAH personally, but anyways, continue.
Well, I worked for Step Up on Second for 6 years. Okay. And 3 years ago, I joined EAH. We were founded in 1968 in the Bay Area, and essentially they hired me to open a Southern California office, which I did here in Santa Monica, and I had been looking for a project to work with the city for a long time until I finally found the project on 10th Street.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. Oh, a question for...
Yeah, I have a question. So this project says that there are 3 units to develop 40-unit affordable housing project. 39 units will be deed restricted as affordable to low-income persons. So that's 80% of area median income, which means what? That like 1-bedrooms are going for what, like $1,400 a month, or is that about right?
You mean what will these be?
Yeah. So 39 of the 40.
It has it right there.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's right here. This is the affordability levels.
Right. So my question is, you said that any more than 3 units being rent controlled would make the project infeasible, but I don't quite understand why that would be if you're already committing to 39 of these 40 units being extreme. I mean, like 4 at 30% of AMI is extremely low income, right? Like,
So can you explain to me? I mean,
'Cause they're
I
getting
was
tax
ready to
credits.
grant it, but you kind of opened a door. So can you explain to me why having 3 rent-controlled units in a project that's almost 100% affordable and at very low income levels would make the project infeasible?
Absolutely. So it's really, I mean, it's a complicated math problem, really. So when this is just kind of generally what we do for all affordable housing projects. We trend our rents at increasing 2.5% a year, and we trend our expenses at increasing 3.5% a year. So depending on how close those numbers are to start with, expenses grow a lot faster than rents, and at some point they cross, and you're no longer making any money. So when I did my initial analysis on the property, I looked at 3 units, and I looked at the historical amounts that Santa Monica rent control would allow. I don't remember the exact number, but it was closer to 1.5% increase per year. And so essentially at a certain point in a couple of years from now, we would be losing money on the project.
I see. So you intend, I mean, obviously
the initial rents will all be very low, or they're technically low, very low, and extremely low.
Right.
And each year the tax credit committee comes out with a new area median income, and we're still restricted to 30, 40, 50% of that, but their rents increase faster than Santa Monica's 1.5% per year. So it will always be restricted to 30% of the area median income. It just goes up at a faster percentage.
Huh. Okay. Thank you.
Anastasia, or to Commissioner Foster, my apologies.
That's okay.
Do we have
Thanks.
questions for the?
No, I was just going to continue.
Okay, you can sit down.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank you. So back to what I was saying before the public comment was that the public takes it seriously when we remove any units for any reason, and we just like to be clear that in this case, what's compelling is that they were vacant for decades. I wish they were not. I don't think there should be any vacant units in this city not being offered for rent, but these were not. And so there are no tenants harmed, and not even essentially any units truly removed in the true sense of the word, because they weren't being offered for rent for decades for inexplicable reasons. But in this case, they are replacing it with affordable housing, which I so appreciate. I go to Housing California every year, and I meet and confer and visit with affordable housing developers from all over our great state, and we very much appreciate the work that you do on the margins upon which you do it. So thank you for that, and for the reduced developer fees. Let's not forget that. So it's a very altruistic and good thing that people choose to do, and I am satisfied that the requirement of replacing the 3 units with the 3 units, 1 for 1, is being met, and I'm very much looking forward to voting yes on this project.
I actually just have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh my God. Sorry. I just thought that there was a rule that when a rent-controlled building is demolished and then there's reconstruction within 5 years, that all of the units have to be rent-controlled. Can someone?
Yes, that rule applies if a property is Ellis.
Okay.
And this is not being Ellis.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions for Mr. Spielberg here. I'm not going to stop saying that. I just love it. Are you getting the land? Is there land being offered below the purchase price by the city of Santa Monica to you to subsidize the cost of development? You purchased it at market rate?
We purchased it at market rate with a loan from the city.
Got it. And are you using project-based vouchers on this project?
We will not be using project-based vouchers. If we were using project-based vouchers, it'd make this question completely different. But we'll be collecting the rents set at those AMIs and making it the project work with that.
So are you, in addition to tax credits, what other sources of financing are on the project?
Well, it's an interesting question, because for this particular project, it's only going to be city money and 9% tax credit.
Oh, it's 9% tax.
Yeah,
okay, all right.
I'll give you 2 little adjuncts to that. Right now, kind of across the state and county, the rest of the money that's available right now has to have a homeless component.
Mm-hmm,
and
I know.
We decided internally and with the city that we wanted to do a senior project. We will have 4 extremely low income, but it's not a homeless project. So that's one answer, but the other answer
Well,
is,
we like to say supportive housing instead of homeless, but anyways, go ahead.
well, supportive housing for formerly homeless individuals. So the other answer, which is important to this discussion, is typically we would also have a perm loan from a bank. And this project does not support a perm loan from a bank with its current cash flow. So restricting 3 units makes it feasible with the current cash flow. That's what I was saying, but we typically like to leverage the city's money and get sources from wherever we can.
Are you getting a density bonus? Like, i.e., could you have made this denser?
No.
No, this is the max density.
Yeah.
Okay.
And with Santa Monica zoning,
I know.
Yeah. So it's yeah.
Okay.
We're building to the max capacity.
Great. Although I'm really surprised you got 9% tax credits because this is not very many units. But great. Okay.
Fully.
So I just have to say that sorry to say I'm not going to waive the 3 units of rent-controlled housing. I think you can take a little bit off of your developer fee or something to that effect to make this work. I think we have to preserve at least the 3 units of rent-controlled housing. But I will say that I'm really applauding you because these are deeply affordable units. I'm sure that this was difficult to pencil. I don't doubt that. Especially because it's low. I think this is pretty low density. 40 units is not very many as far as I'm concerned. And I would just say come to the unincorporated area of the county and develop some properties on county land as well. No, I mean, this is amazing. I always support affordable housing. I think it's so important. Obviously, if this land was vacant, I'm very supportive of this is the first removal permit that I think I'm happy about. So yay, and I'm glad that we're putting affordable housing on this. Any other comments, Commissioner Phillips?
I move. Oh, sorry. Was that from before?
Nope. Yep.
I move that we affirm the findings of fact and affirm the. What is this? A recommendation?
We grant the removal.
Grant the
permit.
removal permit.
Second.
Third.
Can we call roll?
Commissioner Phyllis,
Yes.
Commissioner Foster,
Yes.
Commissioner Sultan, and Commissioner Tarosis.
Enthusiastic, yes.
Motion carries.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's
Mr.
Day.
Spielberg.
Thank you, Steven Spielberg. I'm sure everyone says that to you all the time.
I'm sure you're the first.
I said everyone says it all the time. Okay, I think we're getting a little...
Little punchy.
Yeah, okay, it's late. It's Valentine's Day. We're still here. Sorry to my husband.
Keep it short.
Okay. Moving on to our public hearing items on the agenda here.
No more discussion.
Excuse me, for discussion items. We don't have any public hearing items. I will introduce my item first here. I have requested the board to consider whether to agendize for a future meeting a discussion of making rent decreases retroactive to the date the reduction in services commenced. I think it has come to many of our attention, and certainly mine on a number of occasions, that although we took steps to improve the construction-related decrease process for our traditional rent decrease process, we are granting the decreases from the date the decision is made, not from a date earlier, such as the date that a petition is filed or a date that the harm occurred. I think that that incentivizes landlords to take their time in going through the process so that they are not potentially liable for additional days more than they have to be while the reduction in housing services continues. I think that this leads to forms of tenant harassment. And for me, after having heard numerous stories from the community, I would like our board to explore whether or not there is a streamlined way that we can improve our regulations to make a more equitable rent decrease process. And I'm interested in hearing your thoughts. And we do not have any public comment, I'd just like to mention, on this item.
No, I wanted to talk.
Oh, okay. So Commissioner Phyllis.
I wholeheartedly support this item. I think it's worthwhile to agendize, and I look forward to when we get the chance to discuss it with staff guidance at our next meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Foster.
I remember we talked about this when we talked about construction-related decreases going retroactive to the date, and I'm glad we're finally moving forward on an item with this. Let's bring it back, please.
Great. I agree. I would also just like to add for staff, if we could be presented with some options to mitigate any of our damages and make this process as smooth as possible. I don't think it needs to be exclusive to the date the harm occurred, but other options that would work as well would be useful for us. Lonnie, do we have to actually make a motion to take? Okay. So it sounds like there's consensus here on taking this up with some options at our next meeting. Okay, great. Moving on to discussion item 14B, the request of Vice Chairperson Phyllis that the board agendize consideration of adopting a resolution to City Council recommending a temporary stay on granting development agreements on previously rent-controlled properties in the Pico neighborhood until the City Council finalizes its evaluation of possible zoning restrictions on post-Ellis uses, and 2, the Pico neighborhood plan is adopted and finalized, and B, that the City Council consider re-examining the in lieu fees for affordable housing when new condominium developments replace previously rent-controlled housing. Commissioner Phyllis, would you like to give us some explanation?
Sure. So I think I can keep this pretty brief, but my interest in this item was initiated by a particular project, but also things that I'd seen going on in the Pico neighborhood, in which 15 rent-controlled units across, I believe, 6 properties are being removed, and the plan or the proposal is to replace them, I think, with 19 units. I think there are some significant concerns about that particular project, but this item goes more broad or broader and seeks to address kind of the systemic issues that we have with planning, particularly in the Pico neighborhood and particularly in the wake of council's decision to revisit post-Ellis uses. In particular, I think that we've shown a lot of interest in regulating post-Ellis uses. We've seen, excuse me, a lot of post-Ellis uses that are becoming more creative, I think. In at least 3 circumstances in recent memory, I've seen rent-controlled housing be Ellis'd and then be replaced with commercial uses, including most recently on 4th and Montana, which is not in the Pico neighborhood, but that's being replaced with a children's learning center and a garden. So we're losing a lot of housing to non-residential housing uses. And I think that our rent-controlled housing stock is too precious. So this item basically asks that we consider making recommendations to City Council with particular regard to the Pico neighborhood, because it is a vulnerable, I think there are a lot of structures that are vulnerable to being targeted for redevelop or Ellising and development. So just asked to bring this back, and then in connection with bringing this back, I would ask that we also get an update on where the heck that Ellis Act Study is. That Ellis Act Study was requested in 2016 in the aftermath of Measure LV, where there was a lot of questions being raised about how zoning changes and moratoria affect Ellis activity. A lot of speculation on that. And then we had it come back in November 2017, and that report was considerably inadequate. That report went back, and we haven't heard from it. And it's now been over a year since that initial draft. And I think we really need it. Particularly as City Council is considering the Pico neighborhood plan. We need to understand this, and we also need to it's a transparency measure. I have no idea why the Ellis Act study should take 2 years to do. It was definitely not in the plan, and I know it's not within the jurisdiction of the board, but I'm disappointed that it's taken so long.
Oh, Director Condon here has a comment.
Yeah, well, we will definitely follow up and find out. When I last inquired about that, which I think was in the last month, I was told that they were finalizing it, and I know that they were working on it because I've had a lot of communications with the analyst who was working on it after the consultant did an additional study. So we'll inquire about that and we'll provide additional information. But when I did ask, they said they're finalizing it and prepared to issue it as an information item probably to the City Council.
Are they prepared? I mean, I would ask also that it gets presented to the board since we were the ones who had initiated the request to council.
Well, I'll inquire, but we will give you an update on when it will be issued.
Okay.
Thanks.
So is there consensus to bring back
I have a
B?
comment. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a complete abomination that I've literally been hearing about this Ellis study since before I campaigned for the Rent Control Board, and now here we are in 2019. I do not know what's going on. Honestly, why is there a consultant if you could have done this yourself? And I just think that it's shameful, quite honestly, and a waste of taxpayer dollars. But in any event, I would like a presentation here. I think that it is relevant to a number of items that we've been discussing, and it's also relevant to a lot of this tenant harassment that we're seeing around the city. So I would like to know some, warning signs and motivations, and I'm looking forward to that report back. In terms of what you're asking for here on 14B, I think more information is always useful, and I would definitely support considering adopting a resolution of this nature. Any further comments? Go ahead, Commissioner Foster.
So I have a question for Commissioner Phyllis. So there's A and B. Are you asking for discussion on two separate resolutions in the future? Or at the next meeting?
I mean, we could address them all in one. I defer to staff.
Well, one's very specific about Pico neighborhood, and the other one is in Luffy's for condo developments. They seem separate to me.
We could do two separate items. That probably makes sense.
And so, staff, what is the procedure for coming back with? Remind us with something for resolution. Then do we debate it when we have more information about its relevance for the Rent Control Board, or like with data?
Unlike the drafting of a regulation that normally goes through the process of board discussion item, administrative item, public hearing, because this is a resolution and I think I understand what is being sought, I would draft the resolution and then the board would have the resolution before it and could decide whether to adopt it or not, or if it was not what the board had in mind, or if after hearing public comment it wanted to add or take things away.
There'd just be an edit.
We could do that.
I'm fine with that.
I would like to direct staff to one particular item. So I've heard from various stakeholders and even elected officials in Santa Monica that there are limitations to our ability to stay development. And I understand, obviously, an indefinite stay is certainly not what's being proposed, but I think in ensuring compliance with a neighborhood plan and having a stay of limited duration is permissible, but I think that's one legal issue that I would like to see addressed in the workup to whether we can pass a resolution making that recommendation.
Certainly, if it appeared to me that the board was thinking of voting on and adopting a resolution to do something unlawful, I would let the board know that.
Right. Okay. Great. Thanks.
Great. So it sounds like we have consensus around coming back for future discussion on all three elements of what we discussed under 14 board discussion items. Is there anything further? No. Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to adjournment. Do I move to adjourn the meeting? Does someone move to adjourn the meeting?
I move.
Okay. Does there a second?
Second.
Great. So Commissioner Foster, seconded by Commissioner Phyllis, moved to adjourn. All those in favor? Aye. Great. This meeting is adjourned. Happy Valentine's Day.